ESPN.com posted a really interesting story that, without you even being a football nerd, it can really make you think. And it's a story about the 2004 NFL Draft. Now, you're going to say, why would we be talking about that? Why bring it up? Because the headline in this story today is really good. Think about this. It says, why don't more NFL prospects try to dictate landing spots? Only 3 players have ever done this. And what they mean by that is telling teams, I'm not going to play for you. Now they're going to say, well, that's awfully greedy of them. Hey, look, you got a chance. You had opportunities to pick where you go to work. They don't. So why don't more NFL prospects, and I'm going to give you the reasons why it would be important to do so. And it's amazing it hasn't happened more. And the real issue of the day is it going to happen more often now? So think it through. It's pretty cool on both sides. Only 3 players have ever dictated where they're going to go. And they started dictating by where they're going to go by saying, I'm not going to come there. So why are you going to waste your time? Don't pick me. Don't do it. They are John Elway, who was drafted by the Colts and then traded to the Broncos. Now, of course, he goes on and wins 2 Super Bowls. He retires as a Bronco. He's a Hall of Famer as a Bronco. The Colts, in that move, got an offensive tackle and a quarterback by the name of Mark Herman. Worked out really well for the Colts. Not bad for the Broncos, right? So he did it early on. There's a documentary that's out right now on ESPN about that whole thing, which is pretty fascinating because he was already in the New York Yankees farm system. So he was using that as leverage. He did it. He said, don't draft me. Don't do it. The Colts did it and traded him. Bo Jackson did it. I believe Bo Jackson did it with Tampa Bay. And then he went and played baseball, went and played for the Kansas City Royals, and until the Raiders selected him, I believe later in a later draft or a supplemental draft. The Raiders got him after the fact. The other to pull it off was Eli Manning. Now, Eli Manning didn't have the leverage of baseball and say, well, I'd just go be a professional baseball player elsewhere, so deal with it. Eli Manning pulled it off, and that's where the story goes, and that's where the questions start. Why don't more players do that? And how would it turn out? So Eli Manning in the 2004 draft, it's a really good read. He tells the then San Diego Chargers, don't draft me. I'm not going to play for you. And he's the number 1 overall pick in that draft. And he doesn't want to go there for a number of reasons. So he'd said he would sit out a year. His family had money, and it was viewed as a jerk move. Across the board, it was viewed as a jerk move. He was booed by fans at the draft in New York. They chanted, you suck, while he was up there with the picture because the Chargers went ahead and drafted him. They drafted him number 1. And so there he is, and they're chanting, you suck. He's there with his mom and dad taking a picture holding up the jersey, the awkward jersey photo. Ex-players ripped him and his family. His dad just did it in the interview about the 2004 draft, came out and said, look, I wasn't the one directing this. People think I was. I wasn't the one directing this. But his dad's history played into it. So he was fighting the system, successfully fighting the system that had been in place since the league had started. The draft is supposed to give everyone a chance. When you're terrible, you get to go to the top of the draft and pick conceivably the best players. Now, bad teams keep screwing it up. So a lot of people thought this guy's trying to turn the entire NFL on its head and the entire NFL process on its head. And it's a jerk move. So the NFL draft gives you a chance to not be terrible for long periods of time. His plan worked. The Chargers draft him number 1. He takes the silly, awkward photos. Then they trade him to the New York Giants for picks and the chance to draft Phillip Rivers. Eli Manning wins 2 Super Bowls. He'll be a Hall of Famer. Phillip Rivers had a great career. I mean, I don't know that he will be a Hall of Famer. He might. But it was a really, really good career. But the whole point of it is only 3 times has it ever happened. And Eli Manning is the only one that didn't use another sport to pull it off. So it makes you wonder, if it worked for Eli Manning, why don't more players do it? Why don't more players say, I don't pick me. I'm not going to come there. Especially now. Why don't more players do it? And I think they're going to. So his logic was solid. I mean, Eli Manning was not, he was not wrong in his position. And let me explain the position of a player, and I think a lot of you would agree. And I think it would be even more reasonable now. So why does it make sense to tell a team, no, I'm not for you, particularly if you're a quarterback? So there's a few reasons. And I think it's easy to find recent history to tell you how awful things can go when you go to the wrong place. Bad organizations can ruin a quarterback. Look at Chicago. Look at Cleveland. They're graveyards of quarterbacks. They have history of taking players high in the draft, and it never works out, and everyone's ruined in the process. A case can be made that a historically bad organization selects you. You'll play out your first years of your rookie contract, 4 years, by the way, and be ruined physically and psychologically. Look at the history of Cleveland. Look at the track record of Chicago. Look at Washington. Look at Houston even. Had any one of those players said, no, I know what happens. I'm not coming. I'm not a good fit. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go that bad operation. I don't want to end up like, you can come up with a dozen names of flameouts. You can come up with almost a dozen Cleveland alone. Chicago too. Washington has not hit on anybody. So it does make sense. If you were a superstar young quarterback and here comes Cleveland, here comes Chicago, here comes Washington, I mean, find other teams too. You would say, why would I go there? I know I'm going to end up like the rest of those guys. The team's going to suck. I'm going to take the blame for it. I'm going to get beaten down. And then at the end of my rookie contract, I'm not going to be worth anything. It's a legitimate position. It's realistic. So the goal, just so you can appreciate this, the goal of every NFL player, and few get to achieve this, but the goal of every NFL player is to get to a second contract. Okay? When you're drafted, you're locked in on a rookie deal for the first 4 years. And I'm not saying you are grossly underpaid by any stretch. Yes, you can become wealthy if you can live out the term of a 4-year contract. You will be wealthy. Not super rich, but you'll be wealthy. It's a terrible living. It's a lot of money. So your first contract is 4 years. The second contract, if you've played well, that's what takes you into your late 20s and 30s, and you're set. It's the carrot. Think of it this way. That second contract is the carrot for every single player. You try to get there. It's everything to you. Most people, you only know the Patrick Mahomes of the world and all that, but there's most of the league is not Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or these mega stars. They're guys trying to make 6-7 years in the NFL if they can. They're trying to get a second contract. That way you're 32 and you're done and you're set. So that's the goal. But if you end up with the wrong franchise, and there's very little talent around you if you're a quarterback, you're ruined. David Carr, the Texans. First player taken in the draft when the Texans became the Texans, a new franchise in Houston. They select David Carr first overall. He was sacked in one season more than any quarterback in history. His career never worked out. His career never took off. He was just beaten down. It's a bad team, bad situation. There's nothing a quarterback can do to fix it. Take a look at Cleveland. Take a look at Washington. Take a look at Chicago, Carolina, Arizona, Houston. They are graveyards for quarterbacks. And Eli Manning knew it. Now, his dad said, I had nothing to do with this, but I think his dad's history did have something to do with it. His dad was a perfect example. He was a great player coming out, a really good NFL player who was on a terrible team his entire career. So why not do it, right? Why not? A team is going to pick you. There's going to be 4 or 6 quarterbacks taken the first round. and then probably half of them will go to lousy organizations, and they're going to be ruined. Oh, yeah, they're going to get paid, but that second contract is not going to be what it would be if they, had a great start to their career. So why not tell them ahead of time? Why not pick and choose? Why not use some leverage? In other words, you say, don't draft me, because if you do, I'm not going to show up for work. Here's how that would work. And here's why it should work more than ever before. And then we can debate whether or not you think it's a righteous thing to do. But here's how it works. So these guys coming out of big-time programs now, as opposed to even 4 years ago, even 3 years ago, they're now making money in college. They're making money. I don't know how much they have when they're done. I don't know how much they put away. I don't know any of that stuff, but they're making money. Take Quinn Ewers at Texas for an example. Okay? The guy's making millions. He's playing in Texas making millions. So it's it's easier than ever before for a star quarterback coming out to say, you know what? I'm not coming there. I'll take a year. I'll get healthy. I'll train all the time. I'll be better off a year away than taking your contract and being locked in for 4 to 5 years to have my head kicked in playing for a lousy team in Cleveland or Chicago or Washington. Used to be Houston. So then that player, Quinn Ewers is an example. I don't think he's going to be the first player taken in the draft. Tells organizations, look, don't pick me. I'm prepared to sit out a year. I'm prepared to sit out a year and go into the draft the next year when you don't own my rights rather than play for you and get ruined. Is that a jerk move or smart? You got to admit there's history. You've got to admit, you do know when some of these teams pick you, you are going to be ruined. It's going to be a miserable existence, and the entire city is going to blame you for it. I mean, some organizations, you can't fix it. A quarterback can't fix 7, 8, 9 bad players around him. Can't fix a bad front office either. So why not just take a pass? Guys, don't pick me. Don't pick me. So then you just tell them you're prepared to sit for a year and use the money you've made in college and get healthy and work out all the time, and someone will come and get you. There's always a market. Deion Sanders is the one is going to really sort of light a fuse to this process and this discussion, because he already said that his son is only going to play, I think he listed 4 teams, maybe 5 teams. Dallas was one of them. And he just said ahead of time, don't bother picking this kid. Don't. He's already saying there's only a few places where my kid is going. And it's important, 1, because he knows what he's talking about. 2, his son will probably be the first pick of the draft next year. So will it work? I mean, he's got money, too. First of all, his family's rich, but he's also making money in college. And that's the thing that guys in the past didn't have. I mean, you needed the money as quickly as you could. You needed the job. Now, if you're at a football factory, or you're Shedeur Sanders and you're from a famous family, you're making some money already. So you can afford to sit back for a little while and pick your place, pick your spot, demand your spot. Will it work? When it happens again, it's only happened 3 times. The Eli Manning story is really different. I mean, that was 2004, and people thought it was insane. It's amazing it's not happening now. And when it does, will it work? Will it work for the player? The answer is, yeah, I think probably. If somebody takes it far, okay, here's your real leverage. You're going to say, well, Jeff, what's the leverage? I mean, so you tell Cleveland or you tell Washington not to draft you because you know you're going to end up in a mess. Then really, what's your leverage? The leverage is this. That's their draft pick. They're going to eat that draft pick. That's brutal. That's gold. You're picking high in the draft. You're not just going to take that and go and say, well, we're just going to save it or waste it. It's gold. And if you don't think the player is gold, the pick itself is gold with multiple players. So the leverage a player has is, I know you're not going to eat this draft pick. I know you're not going to pick me first, and I'm telling you, trade me elsewhere. You're not going to say, screw off. We'll just keep the pick. You're not going to do that. So if you go and draft Shedeur Sanders, number 1, he says, forget it, Giants. Then they have nothing to show for the pick. That's pretty tough to explain. It's pretty tough. That would be tough to explain to the New York fans. What are we going to do with this? We're going to do nothing. Nothing. So will it happen this year? I don't know. I think it might. Yeah. And I think it might really happen next year. So why not do it? Okay. Yeah, Jeff, good point. Why not do it? I mean, you're right. I mean, people can think it through. They have agents. Everyone's been around. They've got some money. Why wouldn't a guy say no to Chicago or no to some of these places where it's just, it's a dark hole? It doesn't work. The answer, C.J. Stroud. That's the reason not to do it. His impact on the NFL, his impact on how people look at organizations that were bad, really bad, to turning them around has changed the entire narrative. C.J. Stroud, the Texans were a terrible organization. I would always say they are a terrible organization, but they're not now. They have a track record of ruining quarterbacks. They're nondescript. Nobody cares about them. They're bad. They were badly run top to bottom. There's no upside to them. If you were C.J. Stroud at the time, this is not going to end well. Why do I know that? Because it never ends well. It would have made sense had he said, if you guys draft me, I'm not gonna be there. Don't do it. Or trade me. Here's who I want to be traded to. It would have made perfect sense. I probably would have said, smart move, kid. He seemed like the perfect person to use this leverage and go somewhere else to save himself. But guess what? Guess what happened? This is why I'm not sure how often it happens, because he became the very reason not to do it. It worked. He's gold. They won their division. He's Rookie of the Year. They got an excellent coach and general manager, and everything that was bad about the Texans, everything was bad about the organization is now good. There is not a team with a brighter 3-year future than the Texans, maybe other than Baltimore. And I don't even think that's up for debate. And you could argue maybe the Texans have a greater upside. I don't know. But either way, had he said, I'm not going to Houston, and he would have set out, guess what? This is the reason why I don't think it happens more often. So he says, okay, forget it, Houston. Don't do it. I know what you're like. He's going to be polite about it. Let's pretend he'll be polite about it. Has an agent say, listen, it's just not a good place for him. You're starting from scratch. You got a new coach. It's blah, blah, blah. You give all these diplomatic reasons why you don't want to go there. And had he set out, guess what happens? Chicago or Washington picks him. I mean, they'd be drafting him now. Would it be that much better? No. I mean, history is just as bad. Recent history is even worse. Look at the trajectory of Houston versus Chicago or Washington. That's who would have picked him had he been sitting out. What's he going to do, sit out another year? That would not be smart. So that's the reason why I don't think it's happened. That's what's going to be interesting to watch when it does happen. And that is, okay, you sit out, one of the bad teams is going to pick you again anyway. It's not like the team that's going to pick you next time, New England, for example. It's not like they're going to be any good. It's not a good place to be. Bad is bad. So he's the reason why I think people don't do it. Because a lot of people look at it and go, well, gosh, if he turned the whole place around, if it all worked out for him, I mean, this guy's now a rock star and nothing good, everything good is happening. So why run the risk? Because if I sit out and I tell the Texans no, or I tell the Bears no, next thing I know, Carolina comes and gets me, or Washington gets me, or some trash organization. Will it happen next year? The Sanders family is now the Manning family. I think there's a chance it happens. I think there's a chance it happens in the upcoming NFL draft. But there's sort of the lay of the land of the upside, the reason why you think you would do it. And then the other side of it is, are you really going to be that much better off? I do think it happens. I don't think it happens often. I think it does happen with Shedeur Sanders. I think it does happen with the Sanders family. What can the NFL do? I think a lot of people are going to say, well, gosh, Jeff, what if this is a trend? What if guys figure out they only want to go play for fill in the blank, a sexy franchise in a sexy city? Yeah, that could be. The NFL, remember this, if it does become a problem to the NFL, which is the owners make all the rules. They hire the commissioner. The commissioner works for them. They make the rules. So if it were to become a big problem, say four or five quarterbacks say, I'm not coming, trade me. Get me to Seattle. Get me to Dallas. Get me to, fill in the blank. The NFL, I wouldn't be shocked if the NFL said, if you sit out, they own your rights for 2 years. Because right now they would own your rights for 1. Once the next draft period, next free agency period comes up, you're free to go elsewhere. So they might turn around and say, if you don't show, you stay out of the draft, or you don't show up after getting drafted, they would own your rights for 2 years. I think that might be the recourse. And remember, they don't want to eat the pick. They will catch hell wherever the city is. All right, 512-834-1027 on Twitter or X, @Jeff Ward Show.